I never thought I'd see a grown woman sprinting down Maplewood Drive, arms flailing, screaming like a siren, while a swarm of bees chased her through the morning air. But that's exactly what happened last Tuesday, and the best part, she earned every sting. See, around here, folks like to say, karma moves slow. I disagree. Sometimes karma buzzes. A few weeks ago, this neighborhood was my little slice of peace green lawns, quiet evenings, a steady hum from my backyard hives. Then she showed up. Karen Whitfield, self-appointed queen of the HOA. A woman who believed she owned not just the sidewalks, but everyone's mailboxes, too. It started small, a missing package here, a safety inspection there. But when my deliveries began vanishing for real, I knew it wasn't porch pirates, it was her. And that's when I decided, if Karen wanted to steal from me, maybe she should meet the real workers behind my honey. Before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. And hey, don't forget to subscribe because this one's about to sting. Before the chaos, before the screaming, before the HOA meetings that felt like courtroom trials, life in Maplewood Grove was, dare I say, perfect. I bought this house 5 years ago, after retiring early from the paramedic service. 20 years on the job will teach you two things. Life is fragile and peace is priceless. I wanted somewhere quiet, a place where the loudest sound was a lawnmower in the distance or the gentle buzz from my bee boxes near the back fence. I'd started keeping bees after my doctor told me to find a calm hobby. Turns out bees were perfect teachers. They didn't yell gossip or start neighborhood wars. They just worked quietly, purposefully, with loyalty to their hive. I could sit for hours in a folding chair just watching them come and go, the way they organized their tiny world with more discipline than most HOA boards I've seen. My wife Diane loved the honey but hated the outfit. She said the white beekeeping suit made me look like a marshmallow astronaut. Still, she supported it. Every Sunday morning I'd bring her fresh honeycomb for her toast, and she'd roll her eyes pretending to be unimpressed. We were happy. The neighborhood itself was postcard perfect. 2-story houses with matching mailboxes, trimmed hedges and driveways that gleamed after rain. Everyone waved, everyone smiled, everyone followed the rules, at least until she arrived. Karen Whitfield moved into the cul-de-sac in late spring, taking over the old Parsons house at the corner. From day one, she treated the neighborhood like her personal kingdom. She printed her own HOA guidelines pamphlet before she'd even unpacked her boxes. Within a week, she was knocking on doors with a clipboard taking notes on compliance. The first time I met her, I was inspecting one of my hives in the yard. She walked right up my driveway without asking, hands on her hips, sunglasses big enough to cover half her face. "Excuse me," she said, her tone already halfway to an accusation. "Are you aware that you're keeping dangerous insects this close to residential property?" I looked up from my hive, smiling through the mesh veil. "They're bees, ma'am, harmless unless provoked." "They could sting someone," she snapped, "especially children." "We don't have any kids on this street, Karen," I said. Her jaw tightened. "That's Mrs. Whitfield. And I'll be bringing this up at the next HOA meeting." I shrugged. "Feel free. I'll bring honey." She glared, spun on her heels, and marched away. That was my first warning, and like any good beekeeper, I should have known what happens when you disturb a hive. For a while, nothing happened. I kept to myself, tended my bees, and mowed my lawn on Saturdays like everyone else. My deliveries arrived like clockwork: tools, parts for hive frames, jars, even a few gardening gadgets. I've always been the order online type, less small talk, more productivity. Our mail carrier, Tony, was a friendly guy. Ex-Marine, big smile, always on time. He'd drop off the packages right by my porch, tucked safely behind a potted fern. Sometimes we'd chat for a minute about sports or the weather. I trusted him completely. Then, one Monday morning, Diane called out from the door. "Honey, did you get the delivery from Amazon yesterday?" I shook my head. "Didn't even get a notification." She frowned. "That's weird. Tony said he left it on the porch." We checked, nothing. The fern was still there untouched, but the box was gone. I figured maybe porch pirates were testing the area. It happens everywhere. I didn't think much of it, but then it happened again and again. Always small boxes, nothing expensive, but always mine. Never Diane's craft supplies. Never the neighbor's stuff. Just mine. After the third time, I went to check my security camera, only to find the plug had been pulled. Clean, deliberate, no sign of struggle or damage. Whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing. That night, I mentioned it to my neighbor Paul. He's one of those quiet, level-headed types who minds his business but notices everything. I said, "Hey Paul, you seen anything strange around my porch lately?" He hesitated, glancing toward the Whitfield's house. "You didn't hear it from me, Mike," he said quietly, "but I saw Karen pick up one of your boxes last week." said she was taking it inside for safekeeping because it was unattended. I laughed, thinking he was joking. She took my mail, Paul nodded grimly, said it was an HOA regulation or something. Now I could have gone straight over there, knocked on her door, and raised hell. But I've learned over the years that anger only clouds the mind. And besides, I had something better than anger evidence. The next day I went to the HOA office, a little white building next to the community pool. The secretary, Pam, was there. She's been around since before I moved in. Sweet lady always brings cookies to the meetings. I asked if there were any official rules about package collection. She frowned. No, of course not. That's not HOA business. Why, I smiled. Just checking something. That's when I realized Karen wasn't enforcing rules. She was inventing them. Probably using the HOA badge to justify whatever she wanted. That night I sat in my garage watching the bees drift in the dusk light, the golden glow reflecting off their wings. You know, I said out loud, you folks might actually understand community better than she ever will. It's funny, bees have a strict hierarchy, sure, but they don't exploit each other. They don't steal honey from the next hive over. They understand respect. Maybe that's why I felt such an odd sense of kinship with them. I went back inside and told Diane what Paul said. She looked at me with that expression, only wives have half disbelief, half please don't do anything stupid. Maybe it's just a misunderstanding, she said. Maybe, I replied, or maybe it's theft dressed up as neighborly concern. Over the next few days I noticed Karen's new routine. Every morning she'd take her little white dog Princess on a walk past everyone's porch. Always the same path, always at the same slow pace, eyes darting like a hawk scanning for prey. And every time she passed my house, her dog would stop right at the corner where the mail carrier left packages. Karen would glance around, pick up the box, and pretend to read the label. Sometimes she'd carry it toward her house before circling back like nothing happened. I caught her once mid-grab. I was trimming the hedge and said, "Need help carrying that, Karen?" She jumped, clutching the box. "Oh, I was just making sure no one steals it. Good to know you're volunteering for porch patrol," I said, smiling. She didn't smile back. She just muttered something about community standards and hurried off. That night, as I poured myself a drink, Diane said, "You're smiling. That's not your I forgive her smile. That's your I'm plotting something smile." I grinned. "Just thinking about bees, honey." She sighed. "I don't want to know." She was right. She didn't. Because if Karen wanted to keep stealing, she was about to find out what happens when you mess with a hive that fights back, one that doesn't need lawyers or committees, just a bit of nature and patience. The calm before the sting was over. It started as a trickle one, missing box every few weeks, the kind of thing you'd blame on porch pirates or shipping errors. But by the time summer rolled in, I had lost 7 deliveries. 7. And every one of them had been marked delivered successfully. I'd call Amazon, they'd send replacements. But that wasn't the point. I didn't care about the $20 parts or the bee frames I could easily reorder. What bothered me was the principle. Someone was taking what wasn't theirs right under my nose and acting like they were the neighborhood's moral compass. That's when I decided to stop playing the good neighbor. One morning, I set up my security camera again, this time with a hidden secondary power line running through the siding. I wanted to see what was happening when I wasn't home. At exactly 10:42 a.m., Tony the mail carrier came by, dropped off a package like always, tucked it behind the fern, and waved to my Ring doorbell. Everything looked normal. By 11:15, the motion alert popped up again. There she was, Karen Whitfield. Pink blazer, pearl necklace, holding a clipboard like she was on official duty for NASA. She looked both ways, bent down, picked up the package, and walked off like it was hers. No hesitation. No guilt. Just another day enforcing community safety. I watched the footage 3 times. The smug little smile on her face made my blood pressure spike, but I didn't react. Not yet. I wanted her to dig her own hole a little deeper. That night, I printed the footage and slipped it into a folder labeled Package Theft Exhibit A. Then I did what any reasonable man would do. I sent her a friendly text. Hi Karen. Noticed you picked up one of my deliveries today. Appreciate the concern. Could you drop it by my porch tomorrow, Karen? Hi, Michael. I only took it for safekeeping. HOA's been getting reports of suspicious activity. You can collect it after the next meeting. Suspicious activity. I nearly choked on my coffee. The only suspicious activity was her breaking federal law under the pretense of civic duty. When I told Diane, she laughed so hard she nearly spilled her wine. She's holding your packages hostage now, apparently. Maybe she's waiting for ransom. You're not really going to let her get away with that, are you? Oh no, I said. But I'm not going to yell. I'm going to teach. The next day, I paid a visit to the HOA meeting at the clubhouse. The air inside always smelled like a mix of coffee, cheap perfume, and fresh resentment. Karen was standing at the podium addressing a small crowd of retirees and bored parents. "And I just want to remind everyone," she said in that patronizing tone of hers, "that any unattended packages can be considered community risks. We all need to do our part to maintain safety and order." I raised my hand. "Question, Madam President, are you authorized to remove mail from private property?" Her eyes narrowed. "This isn't about me, Mr. Turner." "Oh, it's about everyone," I replied, smiling. "Including the part where you keep stealing boxes with my name on them," the room murmured. Karen forced a tight smile. "I was protecting the neighborhood, of course," I said. "Because when I think of safety, I think of a woman hoarding bee supplies and coffee filters in her garage." That got a few chuckles from the back. She turned crimson. "This discussion is over," she snapped. "If you have complaints, file them in writing." "I already did," I said, tapping the folder. "With the county sheriff." Her smile faltered. "You wouldn't?" "Oh, I absolutely would. But I didn't actually call the sheriff, not yet. I wanted her to stew. Let her wonder if every knock on her door was an officer coming to talk about federal mail theft." For a week she avoided me. No morning inspections, no HOA notes taped to my door. But just when I thought she'd backed off, another package vanished, this one a replacement part for my smoker box. That was the final straw. I decided to set a trap. Not an angry, vengeful one, a scientific one. I spent the evening building a fake package out of an old Amazon box. Inside, I placed a small GPS tracker and a folded note that said in big bold letters, "Smile for the camera Karen." On the outside, I labeled it "Fragile Organic Wax Samples." That way, even her nosy curiosity wouldn't resist. At exactly 9:30 the next morning, Tony dropped it off. I sat inside pretending to read the paper camera feed open on my tablet. 1015, there she was. Same pink blazer, same smug walk. She glanced around, then crouched and lifted the box like it was a gift from heaven. 5 minutes later, the tracker pinged signal moving toward her driveway. I grabbed my keys, hopped in the truck, and followed the signal on my phone until it stopped inside her garage. When I pulled up, she was in the driveway, watering her flowers, acting casual. "Morning, Karen," I said. "Morning, Michael. Nice day to steal mail, isn't it?" Her eyes widened. "Excuse me," I held up my phone. "Funny thing, my missing package seems to have wandered right into your garage." She froze. "Oh, that one. I was just about to return it. I thought it was for me." "Addressed to Michael Turner, 302, Maplewood," I said flatly. "You thought that was you," she stammered. "There must have been a mix-up." "Yeah, the mix-up was you thinking you're the Postal Service." I looked past her and saw the stack of boxes inside. My boxes, still sealed. "You've been busy," I said. Her lips pressed tight. "I was only safeguarding them." "Sure," I said. "And I'm the queen bee." That line broke her composure. "I'll have you fined for harassment," she barked. "The HOA will hear about this." "Good," I said, turning to leave. "Make sure they spell thief right in the minutes." By that evening, she'd called an emergency HOA board meeting, accusing me of spying and using illegal trackers. The irony nearly made me choke on my coffee. The board predictably didn't want drama. They said it was a misunderstanding and advised both of us to let things cool down. Translation: Karen could do whatever she wanted as long as nobody made noise. That was the moment I realized rules don't fix bullies. Consequences do. When I got home, I stood by my hives, watching the bees move in perfect formation like little golden soldiers. Calm, efficient, lethal when provoked. That's when the idea took root. Karen thought she could control everything people mail, even the HOA. But there's one thing no HOA can regulate: nature. If she wanted to keep invading my property, maybe it was time she got a natural lesson in boundaries. Diane noticed the smirk on my face that night. "You're planning something," she said. "Me no," I replied innocently. "Just thinking about how smart bees are." "Michael," she sighed, "please tell me you're not going to do anything reckless." "Of course not," I said, pouring her a glass of wine. "I'm just going to let nature take its course." And as I stood on the porch that night, watching the faint light from Karen's windows flicker across the street, I whispered to the hives behind me, "All right, little ones, time to teach the queen of the HOA what real royalty looks like." Because from that point on, it wasn't about stolen packages anymore. It was about respect, and the kind of justice that buzzes louder than any HOA meeting ever could. By the time the sun rose the next morning, my plan was already humming in the back of my mind like one of my hives. Karen had crossed the line from annoyance to obsession, and I knew if I didn't put an end to it now, she'd eventually find a way to make me the villain. The HOA always protected her. The neighbors were too polite to confront her. But I had something Karen didn't: patience. and a few thousand tiny winged allies who didn't mind a little teamwork. I started with research. There's a big difference between retaliation and strategy. One feels good for 5 minutes, the other changes the board forever. So first thing, I set up a new camera system, not the flashy ones she could spot, but a small black lens tucked inside one of my B boxes aimed perfectly at the porch. If she wanted to play games, I'd make sure the rules were recorded in 4K. Then came the trap itself, a simple, harmless idea that would eventually sting a lot more than she expected. I spent a Saturday morning preparing a fresh cardboard box. I labeled it, Fragile Premium Honeycomb Samples. Handle with care. Inside, I placed another tiny GPS tracker, a motion-triggered die pack, the kind used for fishing bait marking, and a small envelope containing a note that said, "This package contains property protected by law. Tampering may result in criminal charges and possibly something worse." I placed it squarely on the porch in the exact spot Tony always left deliveries. The bait was set. Now Karen was a creature of habit. Every morning around 10, she'd walk her fluffy white dog Princess like clockwork. She wore oversized sunglasses and carried a mug that said "Number Ho Queen." That's when she did her inspection rounds. At 9:55, I poured a coffee, sat on the couch, and opened the live camera feed. My finger hovered above the record button. 1003. There she was, right on time. She slowed near my driveway, looked around like a spy in a bad TV show, and spotted the box. The corners of her mouth twitched into a satisfied little grin. She pretended to check her phone, then bent down and scooped the package up, careful, dainty, like she was touching fine china, and then she was gone. I waited 10 minutes, then opened the GPS tracker on my phone. The blinking dot stopped exactly where I expected her garage. I gave it another hour just to be sure, then walked over. She was out front, pruning her roses like nothing happened. "Morning, Karen," I said cheerfully. "Mr. Turner," she replied stiffly, not meeting my eyes. "Say you wouldn't happen to have seen a package on my porch this morning, would you?" She feigned confusion. "Package, oh, you mean that suspicious-looking box? I secured it for the neighborhood's safety." "Appreciate that," I said. "You mind if I come collect it?" Her hand froze on her gardening shears. "It's inside. I was planning to return it later." "I'll save you the trip," I said, stepping past her before she could respond. Wait, she started, but I was already looking at the garage. The door was open just enough for me to see a stack of boxes. My boxes. She lunged forward, blocking the entrance. "You can't just barge into my property," I smiled. "Oh, but you can barge into mine." Her eyes darted around, desperate for control. "You're harassing me." "Funny," I said, pulling my phone from my pocket because this GPS tracker and video footage say otherwise. For a moment she froze. Then she hissed through her teeth. "This is a misunderstanding." "Sure it is," I said, stepping back. "And in case you're wondering, that box you took, it's rigged with a marker die. You might want to check your hands." She glanced down. The faint yellowish stain was already spreading across her palms. The look on her face was priceless. She gasped, dropped her pruning shears, and ran inside, slamming the door. I went home, made another cup of coffee, and smiled the entire time. By late afternoon, my phone rang. It was the HOA's Vice President, Greg Sanders, a nervous man with a permanent sweat stain on his collar. Mike," he said awkwardly, "Karen filed a complaint against you. Says you're stalking her." I laughed. "Greg, she stole 6 of my packages and just got caught red-handed, literally. I have proof." There was a pause. You have proof." "I do." "Want me to send it to the board or straight to the sheriff?" Let's not escalate," he said quickly. "I'll call a meeting tonight. Let's resolve this quietly. Quietly." That's HOA speak for protect the loudest person. I showed up anyway, wearing my best unbothered face. The meeting was held in the community center. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, and folding chairs, arranged like a budget courtroom. Karen was already there, dressed like she was attending a press conference. A few board members sat in a semicircle holding clipboards like judges. Greg cleared his throat. "We're here to discuss recent disagreements between neighbors." Karen started before he could finish. "He's been spying on me, setting traps and spreading lies. I was only safeguarding the community." I held up a flash drive. "Here's the footage of you walking up my porch, taking the box and opening it in your garage." The room went silent. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a goldfish. That's edited." Greg squinted at the still image on my tablet, her face in full view holding the package. "That looks pretty real, Karen." One of the neighbors, Paul, chuckled quietly from the back. "Yeah, that's her. Same pink jacket." Karen glared at him. "I was protecting the neighborhood from dangerous materials. Dangerous honeycomb, I said, deadpan. Very heroic. A few muffled laughs rippled through the room. Greg sighed. Karen, we can't condone removing items from private property without consent. She crossed her arms. Then maybe the HOA should establish new rules about unattended packages. Greg rubbed his forehead. We'll discuss it in the next term. The meeting ended without a verdict, but I didn't need one. The court of public opinion had already delivered its sting. When Karen stormed out, everyone watched. Some shook their heads, others smirked. The queen bee of the HOA had been caught trying to steal honey. Back home, Diane was waiting with 2 mugs of tea. How'd it go? I smiled. Let's just say I think she's allergic to embarrassment. Good, she said, handing me a mug. Maybe she'll finally leave you alone. I chuckled. Oh, she will, but not because she wants to. See, Karen wasn't the type to learn from humiliation. She was the type to double down, and I knew she'd come back angrier and more reckless. But that was fine. I was ready. That night, I went out to my hives, lifted the lid gently and whispered, "She's not done yet, is she?" The bees buzzed softly in response, like a choir tuning up for the next act. The next morning, a new HOA notice was taped to my door. It read, effective immediately, no resident may keep insects, hives, or any form of pollinating colonies within HOA grounds. I laughed so hard I nearly fell off the porch. She wanted to declare war, fine. But she'd forgotten one crucial detail. I'd registered my hives with the county agricultural program 3 years ago. HOA rules didn't override state law. She could file every complaint in the world, and I'd still have my bees. And just like that, the battle lines were drawn. Karen might have her HOA bylaws and her clipboard army. But I had patience proof, and about 60,000 buzzing reasons not to mess with me again. The game was no longer about stolen boxes. It was about pride and the slow, sweet taste of payback that was just starting to drip like honey. There's a saying in firefighting I used to live by. You don't fight fire with fire, you fight it with strategy. And when it came to Karen, Whitfield's strategy was the only thing that would sting hard enough to make her think twice. After the ridiculous bee ban notice appeared on my door, I spent the morning with a cup of coffee and a grin flipping through the county ordinances. Karen's HOA decree had as much legal weight as a post-it note. Section 14, subsection B, of the County Agriculture Code registered pollinators are protected as beneficial assets to the environment. In other words, my bees were safer than she was. Still, I wasn't going to confront her head-on again. I'd seen her type before corner her, and she doubles down, expose her, and she plays the victim. No, she needed to trap herself this time, preferably with a little help from the hive. That afternoon, I moved one of my smaller hives from the backyard to the front porch, setting it a few feet from the mailbox. I told Diane it was for better sunlight. She saw right through me. Better sunlight, huh? She said, arms crossed. I grinned. Purely educational purposes. She sighed the way only a woman who's seen too many of my plans unfold can sigh. Just don't hurt anyone. Wouldn't dream of it, I said, though I couldn't help smirking. You see, bees don't attack without reason. They're not like people. They don't gossip or seek revenge. They react to intrusion, to vibration, to trespass. All I needed to do was let nature do its work. Over the next few days, I made the setup look natural. I planted bright lavender bushes near the hive to keep the bees busy, and the scene pretty wouldn't want anyone to suspect a sting operation. Then I ordered a few more packages online just to bait the trap. When the first box arrived, I left it out in plain sight. Not tucked behind the fern this time, right on the porch next to the hive. The label read, Organic Royal Honey Fragile. If Karen's curiosity was a spark, this was a can of gasoline. The next morning, I was sitting inside pretending to read the paper, though my eyes were locked on the camera feed. 1:007 a.m. The same familiar sight. The pink blazer, the oversized sunglasses, and that little dog straining at the leash. Karen paused halfway up the sidewalk, clearly debating whether to risk it. I could almost hear her inner monologue. Is that a hive? Are those bees? Should I report this? Should I just take it? Then predictably the arrogance won. She marched right up to my porch, muttering something about violations. The hive buzzed louder, a soft warning. She reached for the box eyes, darting nervously at the bees hovering around it. One landed on her sleeve. She froze, then waved her hand frantically. Bad move. The sound that came next was pure suburban poetry, a high-pitched yelp followed by a flurry of motion. Karen dropped the box, stumbled backward, and swatted wildly as 3 bees circled her head. Princess barked and bolted toward the street leash dragging. Karen shrieked, "Help, they're attacking me!" From my living room window, I took a sip of coffee. "No, Karen," I muttered, "they're defending themselves." By the time she made it back to the sidewalk, 2 more bees had joined the chase. She ran down the block, swatting and yelling, her dog barking like a car alarm. I could have posted the footage online right then and there. It was gold. But I waited. Patience, remember. Later that day, my phone buzzed with an incoming HOA alert: emergency meeting tonight, topic bee safety concerns. Of course, the meeting was a full house. Everyone had heard about the bee attack. Karen arrived with her hand wrapped in a bandage the size of a boxing glove and a dramatic neck scarf like she'd just survived a war movie. Greg, the HOA vice president, cleared his throat. "Karen, you requested this meeting." She stood up with the poise of a courtroom plaintiff. "Yes, I did. Fellow residents, I was viciously attacked this morning by a swarm of aggressive bees kept illegally by Mr. Turner." Murmurs rippled through the room. I raised a hand calmly. "They're not aggressive, Greg. They're pollinators. Also legally registered with the county. Want to see the paperwork?" Karen's face twitched. "Paperwork doesn't change the fact that I was stung on community property. Actually," I said, pulling out my phone, "you were on my porch." I played the video, crystal clear footage of her trespassing, reaching for the box, and panicking when the bees swarmed. The sound of her screaming filled the room like a siren. Someone in the back snorted. Another person coughed to hide a laugh. Karen's jaw dropped. You can't record me without consent." Greg raised a hand. "Karen, that's a public-facing porch. It's perfectly legal." I added, "Also, thanks for proving my case that you were trespassing again." The laughter wasn't subtle this time. Even Greg cracked a smile. Karen's face turned scarlet. "This is harassment. I'll call the sheriff." "Already did," I said. "He confirmed everything's legal. The hives are protected. And so is the footage." That was the final sting. She stormed out, muttering threats under her breath, leaving her paperwork scattered like fallen leaves. When I got home, Diane was waiting on the porch swing, sipping tea. "So, how many people laughed this time?" "Enough," I said, grinning. "But I don't think she's done yet." "She never is," Diane said. "So what's next?" "Next," I said, glancing at the hives, "we let karma fly free." And karma, as it turned out, didn't take long. Over the next week, Karen tried everything. She called animal control. They confirmed the bees were domesticated and harmless. She contacted the county. They told her she was lucky not to be charged with trespassing. She even tried sending out an HOA newsletter titled "Danger in the Neighborhood: How Bees Threaten Our Children." Problem was, there were no children on our street. Not one. The neighbors were starting to see through her nonsense. Paul told me, laughing, "She tried to convince me your bees killed her begonias. I told her bees pollinate flowers, not murder them." But Karen's ego couldn't handle public doubt. The more people mocked her, the angrier she became. One night around midnight, I saw her silhouette creeping along the street from my window. She stopped near my driveway phone flashlight, flicking on and off. Probably checking the hive again, plotting her next move. I stepped onto the porch. "Evening, Karen." She jumped. "Oh, I was just inspecting for safety hazards." "Middle of the night seems like the perfect time," I said. "I'll have you removed from this neighborhood," she hissed, backing away. I smiled. "Careful, Karen. Bees don't like loud noises." She turned and fled into the dark, mumbling curses. The next morning, Tony, the mail carrier, delivered a small parcel to me. "Got a good story for you," he said. "Someone called the post office yesterday, said we should ban deliveries on your street because of bee attacks." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the box. "Let me guess, same voice that tried to ban porch furniture last month." He winked. "You got it." That's when I realized Karen wasn't going to stop until she either won or self-destructed. And truth be told, I didn't need to do anything more to push her. She was already unraveling. All I had to do was keep my hives humming and my cameras rolling. Because soon enough, she'd make her biggest mistake, yet one that not even the HOA could excuse. She'd take the war straight to the bees. And that, as every beekeeper knows, never ends well. By the following week, Maplewood Grove felt like it was holding its breath. The usual morning routines, sprinklers, ticking coffee, brewing dogs, barking, were still there, but beneath it all there was this new kind of tension. Everyone knew about the bee incident. Some laughed, some pretended not to, but all of them waited to see what Karen Whitfield, self-declared ruler of the HOA, would do next. And I knew she wouldn't stay quiet for long. The woman was like a wasp knocked down her paper nest, and she builds another louder one somewhere else. Sure enough, on Monday morning, a white SUV rolled slowly down the street with Maplewood HO, authorized personal magnet signs, slapped on the doors. Out stepped Karen Gregg, the vice president, and 2 other board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. They stood at the end of my driveway, clipboards in hand, talking in hushed tones. Karen pointed toward my porch like she was inspecting a crime scene. Diane, who was sipping her tea on the porch swing, muttered, "Oh, this should be good." Karen finally called out, "Mr. Turner, we're conducting an emergency safety inspection per HOA Section 27, Clause 6. I smiled. "Never heard of that one." "It covers environmental hazards," she said chin high. "Namely, aggressive insects kept within proximity to community walkways." "Ah," I said, walking toward her. "You mean my bees. The ones that stung you after you trespassed." Her jaw twitched. "The community voted that your hives are a threat." I glanced at Greg. "Did the community vote, Greg?" He looked like a man caught in the middle of a divorce. "Well, not officially. Thought so," I said. Karen ignored him. "We've issued a formal notice of violation. Failure to remove the hives within 72 hours will result in daily fines." "Go ahead," I said, handing her a folder. "Here's my state registration, agricultural license, and documentation showing these bees are legally protected. You can fine the county if you'd like." Greg read the first page and sighed audibly. The other two board members exchanged looks, realizing they'd just been marched into an ambush. Karen's face reddened like she'd swallowed a chili pepper. "You think you're clever," she hissed. "We'll see what animal control says about this." "Perfect," I said. "They're welcome to visit." "The bees love company." She stormed off, trailed by her reluctant entourage. Diane chuckled. "You're enjoying this way too much." "Only a little," I said. "Mostly I'm just fascinated. I've seen hornets with more logic." That evening I grilled steaks on the back patio while Diane read the paper. The bees floated lazily around the lavender golden in the setting sun. For a moment the world felt peaceful again. Then headlights flared at the end of the driveway. A black county SUV. "Well, Diane said you did invite animal control." A tall man in uniform stepped out, clipboard in hand. "Evening, folks. Got a call about aggressive pollinators." I smiled. "That'd be us." "Come on, I'll show you the setup." He followed me around back. "You registered with the county 3 years ago," I said, handing over the same folder. He skimmed it and nodded. "Looks good. They're Italian honeybees, gentle breed. Neighbors should be grateful." I grinned. "Try telling that to our HOA president." He laughed. "Ah, one of those calls." He took a quick look at the hives, even dipped a finger in one frame of honey. "You keep them clean. No swarm risk, no disease." "Honestly, I wish all my calls were like this." "Appreciate that," I said. He left 10 minutes later, promising to file a report that everything was perfectly legal and safe. I thought that would be the end of it. But with Karen, nothing ever ends. It just mutates. The next morning she was out again, this time with flyers. She handed one to every doorstep like a missionary, spreading the gospel of paranoia. The headline read, "Warning, neighborhood infestation, public health at risk. Aggressive bees threaten children and pets. HOA urges residents to sign petition for removal." The problem, she used a photo of hornets she found online. Paul, my neighbor, showed me his copy, laughing so hard he nearly spilled his coffee. "She says the bees are planning an uprising," he joked. "Tell her to wear armor," I said. By the end of the week, the petition had 3 signatures, hers, her husband's, and Greg's, who admitted later that she bullied him into it. The rest of the street ignored it. Some even hung fake cardboard bee boxes in solidarity. It was becoming clear that Karen's war wasn't about bees or safety, it was about control. But control has a funny way of slipping away when you push too hard. That Saturday, during the HOA's monthly open forum, she tried one last power move. She stood in front of 24 residents, holding up a jar of my honey like it was radioactive waste. "This," she declared, "is a product of illegal beekeeping, endangering our homes." I couldn't resist. Funny, because that same jar won first prize at the county fair last year. A few chuckles. Then I added, "You might have even bought one at the farmer's market. I donate half the proceeds to the local school garden." Her mouth opened, then closed. Someone from the back yelled, "We love that honey." Another called out, "Karen, maybe you're just allergic to accountability." The room erupted in laughter. Karen slammed the jar down and shouted, "This isn't a joke." But at that point it was. Everyone knew it. Greg, bless him, finally stood up. "Karen, enough. The board finds no violation. The bees stay." Her face twisted, and for a moment I thought she might actually explode. "You're all fools," she spat. "If the HOA won't protect this neighborhood, I will." And with that she stormed out. I watched her go, and something in her voice chilled me. That wasn't frustration, it was resolve. That night around 1130, Diane nudged me awake. "Did you hear that?" Outside, the motion light flicked on. I crept to the window. There she was. Karen, skulking along the sidewalk in a dark hoodie, dragging a metal canister. "Please tell me that's not," Diane whispered. "Pesticide," I finished grimly. "Yep." She knelt near the hive, unscrewing the cap. I was already halfway down the stairs when the first scream split the night. She'd knocked over the hive. Thousands of bees poured out like smoke from a fire. The swarm hit her fast. Her flashlight fell to the ground beam, spinning wildly. I saw her running, flailing, knocking over another hive in the process. The street lit up with porch lights. Doors opened. Shouts filled the night. By the time I reached the driveway, Karen was sprinting toward her house, waving her arms like a windmill covered in bees. Her husband opened the door just in time for half the swarm to follow her inside. The next 5 minutes sounded like a horror movie. When the sheriff arrived, same officer who inspected earlier, he didn't even hide his smirk. "She trespassed again, didn't she?" "Afraid so," I said. "And vandalized county-registered property." He nodded. "Well, I guess nature took care of the rest." Paramedics treated her for multiple stings, though none were serious. The story spread fast. HOA president hospitalized after attacking legal beehives. By morning, the video was all over the neighborhood group chat. Someone had caught the entire thing on a security cam from across the street. Karen didn't show her face for days. Greg resigned as vice president the following week, saying, "I'm too old for this circus." The board voted to suspend her indefinitely pending an investigation. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. The hum of my hives was victory enough. Diane, ever the voice of reason, said over breakfast, "You didn't have to lift a finger, did you?" "Nope," I said. "I just let nature do what the HOA never could balance itself." Still, as I looked out at the quiet street, I knew this wasn't quite the end. Karen Whitfield wasn't the kind to admit defeat. But the more she fought, the more the world saw her for what she really was, a self-appointed queen whose own hive had finally turned on her. And deep down, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of poetic satisfaction. After all, I'd told her from the start, you mess with the bees, you get the buzz. It was almost peaceful again. For a few days, the street felt lighter, like the air itself had stopped holding its breath. No flyers, no HOA notices taped to my door, no Karen marching around like a one-woman security patrol. I almost started to think it was over. Almost. Because if there's one thing I've learned about people like Karen Whitfield, it's that silence isn't surrender, it's planning. 3 nights after her bee battle, the sound of tires crunching gravel woke me at 2:17 a.m. I peeked through the blinds and saw headlights idling near my property line. A white SUV, the same one with the HOA magnets, sat under the streetlight. Then the driver's door opened. Out stepped Karen, her face still swollen, hair tied back, long gloves up to her elbows. In her hands, a flashlight, a shovel, and what looked suspiciously like a can of bug spray. "Diane," I whispered. "She's back." My wife groaned into her pillow. "Tell me you're not going out there. I'm just making sure she doesn't burn the house down." "Michael, please," she murmured. "Let karma handle it." I smiled faintly. "That's exactly what I'm doing." I slipped out to the garage and checked the camera feed on my phone. Karen was creeping along the fence line, pointing the flashlight at the hive stands. She knelt beside one of the smaller boxes, the one I'd moved earlier that week for repairs. But here's what she didn't know: that box was empty. The active hives had already been relocated across the street at the request of my neighbor Paul, who wanted his apple trees pollinated. I'd even left him a loner hive safely behind his garden fence. So while Karen prepared to wage chemical warfare on an empty hive, the real army was resting quietly, 50 feet away, in her direct line of fire. She unscrewed the bug spray cap, muttering to herself, "Let's see you buzz now, you little monsters." I turned the phone camera toward Paul's property. The motion sensor light flicked on. The bees, disturbed by sudden brightness, began to stir. It started small, a soft ripple, the kind you hear before a storm breaks. Then, as she kicked over the decoy hive, it happened. A dark cloud rose from Paul's fence line, twisting like smoke. Karen froze. Her flashlight beam wobbled, catching hundreds of glittering wings. The hum deepened, vibrating through the quiet street. And then they swarmed. Karen screamed, dropping the can and the light. She ran for her SUV, waving her arms, tripping over her own shovel. The swarm followed, chasing her in a furious golden halo. The noise woke the whole block. Porch lights snapped on one after another. Curtains parted. Paul stepped out in his bathrobe, holding a mug of coffee like it was popcorn. "Everything all right out there?" he called. Karen bolted past him, shrieking, "Yerbies, they're trying to kill me." He blinked. At this hour, they're unionized now. Even Diane, standing beside me at the window, couldn't help laughing. Oh my God, she's being chased by karma, literally. Karen reached her SUV, dove inside, and slammed the door, but a handful of bees made it in with her. The vehicle lurched forward, zigzagging down Maplewood Drive, horn blaring, headlights swinging like a panic alarm. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. "Yeah, hi," I said. "It's Michael Turner on Maplewood. There's been another incident involving our HOA president." "No, not serious, but you might want to send someone before she crashes into a mailbox." 10 minutes later, flashing red and blue lights painted the houses. Karen's SUV sat half in, half out of her driveway, engine still running. The sheriff, the same one who'd inspected the hives weeks earlier, stood outside, shaking his head. He spotted me walking over and smirked. "Mr. Turner, busy night, you could say that," I said. "Looks like she tried to take out another hive." He chuckled. "Well, she'll have a hard time explaining the trespassing footage again. Mind if I pull your camera records? Be my guest." Karen was sitting on the curb, paramedics tending to a few new stings on her neck. Her hair was tangled, face streaked with tears and dirt. When she saw me, she glared with such venom I almost admired it. "This is your fault," she shouted. "You set me up." I folded my arms. "Karen, you broke into my property again. I think the bees just enforced the neighborhood bylaws for me." The sheriff stifled a laugh. "Ma'am," he said gently, "you're lucky those were honeybees. A swarm of wasps would have put you in the ER. "They should be destroyed," she screamed. "They're dangerous." "They're not dangerous," he said, scribbling on his clipboard. "But trespassing with a chemical substance is. We'll file a report." That word report hit her like a slap. "You can't do this." "I'm the HOA president," the sheriff raised an eyebrow. "Not after tonight, you're not." He turned to me. "We'll take it from here, Mr. Turner. Just keep your hives where they are." "Oh, believe me," I said, "they're not going anywhere." As the patrol cars pulled away, Paul ambled over, robe fluttering in the breeze. "You know," he said, "I think the bees like her perfume. Maybe they just wanted their queen back," I said. He snorted. "Best entertainment I've had all year." The next morning, Maplewood Grove was buzzing with gossip. Literally every porch had someone whispering, "Did you see the video?" Because of course someone's doorbell camera had caught the entire midnight fiasco, the cloud of bees, the screaming, the chaotic escape. By noon, the clip was viral on the neighborhood Facebook group. The title, "HOA President Declares War on Bees and Loses." Greg resigned officially that afternoon, saying he was retiring from civic duty. The rest of the board voted unanimously to suspend Karen pending investigation. Within days, word spread that she'd been fined by the county for unauthorized pesticide use and trespassing. Her husband, poor man, put their house up for sale 2 weeks later. When the moving truck finally arrived, I was out front weeding my lavender bed. Karen stood by the curb wearing oversized sunglasses to hide the fading stings. She hesitated for a moment, then muttered, "You think you've won, don't you?" I wiped my hands on my jeans. "No, Karen. I think the neighborhood did." Her lip trembled, but she said nothing more. As the truck pulled away, a few bees drifted lazily through the air, glinting in the sun. One landed softly on her car window. She swatted it in panic, accelerating like she was fleeing a crime scene. When she was gone, the silence that followed felt different, not just quiet, but free. That evening, the neighbors gathered by my fence. Paul brought beer, Mrs. Jenkins brought lemon bars, even Greg showed up with an apologetic shrug. We sat in lawn chairs watching the sunset while the bees floated peacefully nearby. "Never thought I'd say this," Greg admitted, "but those bees did more for community order than the HOA ever did." I raised my bottle. "To teamwork," I said. The laughter that followed felt like the real exorcism of Maplewood Grove. Later that night, Diane leaned her head on my shoulder as we watched the hives glow in the dusk. "You didn't destroy her, you know," she said softly. "She did that all by herself." "I know," I said. "That's the funny thing about karma, it doesn't need help. Just a little direction." I walked over to the hive, laid my hand gently on the wooden box and whispered, "Good job, girls. You defended your home and mine." The steady hum beneath my palm felt alive, protective, loyal. It was the sound of balance restored, the kind you only hear after a long fight finally ends. The HOA still existed on paper, sure, but in practice, the neighbors started jokingly calling it Honey Owners Association. And for the first time since I moved here, everyone actually smiled when they walked past my yard. Peace had returned to Maplewood. Real peace. The kind that hums quietly, under the summer air, sweet and steady, as honey dripping from a comb. For the first time in a long time, the neighborhood didn't feel like a battlefield. The lawns were greener, the sidewalks quieter, and the only buzz anyone heard came from my hives, not from gossip or HOA decrees. It was almost poetic, really. Nature had done what endless meetings, warnings, and complaints never could. Karen Whitfield was gone. Officially, the HOA board called it a voluntary relocation for health and personal reasons. Unofficially, everyone knew the truth. She'd been stung one too many times by her own arrogance. Her house sat on the market for months before a young couple bought it, people too new to remember her reign of pink blazers and HOA citations. I didn't celebrate, at least not outwardly. I didn't need to. There was satisfaction in the simplicity of each morning, now walking out to the porch, checking the hives, and seeing neighbors wave without hesitation. People who used to avoid eye contact now stopped to chat. Some even asked about keeping bees themselves. Funny how fear can turn into fascination once the tyrant is gone. One morning Paul wandered over with his usual mug of coffee. "You hear about the board meeting last night?" I shook my head. "No, I was too busy bottling honey." "They're dissolving the HOA," he said, grinning. "Turns out after all that drama, nobody wants to be in charge anymore. They're converting it into a voluntary neighborhood committee. No fines, no random rules, just common sense." I laughed. "So we finally got self-government. More like bee government," he said. "You're practically our mascot now." He wasn't wrong. My jars of honey had become the unofficial peace symbol of Maplewood Grove. Every neighbor had one, each labeled "Hive Justice, Made in Maplewood." Someone even made shirts. It was surreal watching something that started as a feud become a community inside joke. But beneath the humor, there was something deeper, a quiet lesson about control boundaries and what happens when one person forgets that a neighborhood isn't a kingdom. About a month later, the doorbell rang. Diane answered and came back holding a small envelope. "You're going to want to see this," she said. Inside was a handwritten letter, shaky, uneven, but unmistakably Karen's cursive. "Michael, I know you think I got what I deserved. Maybe I did. The doctors said I was lucky, but I've had time to think about this place, about you, about the bees. You were right. I wanted to control everything. Maybe because everything else in my life was falling apart. When my husband left, the HOA became the only thing I could run. I see now how pathetic that sounds, but it was something to hold on to. You don't have to forgive me. I just wanted you to know I sold the house to pay my medical bills. The new owners seem nice. Take care of them the way you took care of your hives." Karen, I sat there for a while staring at the paper. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was close enough. Diane touched my shoulder. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "Guess everyone learns eventually. Some just need more stings than others." That weekend, I left a small jar of honey on the old Whitfield porch. No note, no message, just the golden glass catching the sunlight. Maybe someday she'd pass by, see it, and smile. Or maybe the new family would enjoy it, unaware of the history that sweetened it. Either way, it felt right. As summer turned to fall, the hives thrived. The bees were strong, their population healthy. The lavender I planted months ago was now a rolling sea of purple. Kids from the next street over started visiting on weekends with their parents, fascinated by the buzzing colonies. I taught them how bees communicate through dances, how every worker has a purpose, how the hive functions not through control but cooperation. The irony wasn't lost on me. One afternoon, while I was showing a group of kids how to safely approach the hive, little Timmy Jenkins asked Mr. Mike, "Aren't you scared they'll sting you?" I smiled beneath my veil. "No, kiddo. They don't sting unless they're scared. Bees just protect what's theirs, like any good neighbor." He nodded seriously, then said, "So, the bees are kind of like superheroes," I chuckled. "Exactly. Tiny superheroes with wings." Later that night, I sat on the porch with Diane, sipping tea as the sky turned gold. She looked at me over her mug. "You realize you've become the wise old beekeeper of Maplewood, right?" "I was aiming for neighborhood menace," I said. "But I'll take that promotion." She laughed. "It suits you." The truth was, the whole thing had changed me too. I'd spent years chasing quiet, thinking peace meant isolation. But maybe real peace wasn't about shutting the world out. Maybe it was about finding the courage to defend it when someone tries to poison it. And sometimes the universe doesn't need your fists or your rage to fight back. It just needs a hive full of honest, hardworking bees and a little patience. As the evening settled, I glanced at the new house across the street. The young couple had hung fairy lights along the porch railing. Their little girl was chasing fireflies in the yard, giggling. Her laughter echoed through the neighborhood, free, unguarded. Diane followed my gaze. "You know," she said softly, "you might have saved more than just your bees." I smiled. "Maybe. But the truth is they saved us." A soft hum drifted from the hives as the last light faded. The bees were returning home, glowing like amber in the sunset. Before heading inside, I taped a small wooden sign to the fence, one I'd carved that afternoon. It read, "Respect the hive, and it will respect you." It wasn't just about the bees anymore. It was about balance, about not letting one person's chaos infect everyone else's calm. As I turned off the porch light, I whispered one last time, half to myself, half to the hives. Sleep well, girls. You've earned it. And as the steady hum of the colony filled the night air, I realized the sound had become more than just background noise. It was a reminder that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply buzzes until you finally learn to listen. You know, folks, this story started as a petty HOA dispute, stolen packages, power trips, and endless complaints. But it ended up teaching me something I wish I'd learned sooner. Real power isn't about control. It's about harmony. The bees taught me that. Every one of them has a role, and not a single one tries to dominate the hive. They build, they work, they protect, and when they're left alone, they make something sweet out of nothing. People could learn a lot from that. Karen wanted control so badly that she forgot what it means to live in a community. But in trying to destroy mine, she woke something bigger, balanced karma, maybe even a bit of poetic justice. So if you've ever dealt with a Karen in your life, someone trying to dictate how you live, how you grow, or even how you breathe, remember this. Stay calm, stay kind, and let your hive speak for you. Because eventually, karma always buzzes back.